If you're a property investor, I've got an important question for you. When was the last time you thought seriously about your property manager? Now, if you think their main job is really just collecting rents or organising tradies when something breaks down, I've got news for you. Things have changed dramatically. In fact, the world of residential property management's turned on its head in the last 5 years. New legislation, shifting tenant expectation, work from home dynamics, and rapid tech adaptation means that managing your investment property is no longer a simple job that you can just entrust to anyone, or worse, it's definitely not something you should do for yourself. And if you get this wrong, the consequences can be very expensive and actually quite stressful. But here's the good news. Property managers have also evolved, or at least the good ones have. They're no longer just rent collectors, they're strategic investment managers, helping you protect and grow your wealth while navigating one of the most highly regulated sectors in real estate. So in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, I'm joined by Leanne Jopson, National Director of Property Management at Metropole. Now, Leanne's been at the coalface of this transformation, and today she's going to reveal how the role of property managers has shifted, what changes have occurred and what's still coming in the pipeline, and what smart property investors need to be thinking about to future-proof their property portfolios. And while you might think this is an episode just for landlords, I promise you it's more than that. Whether you own one property or a dozen, what we discussed today could save you thousands and actually help you sleep a lot better. So let's get on with our show so that you understand what some of these changes mean to you as a property investor.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Leanne, it's great to have you back on the show. I know a lot's changed for property investors out there because the residential tenancy laws have moved bit by bit in favour of tenants. That's happening in all states. So why do you think today's discussion is going to be important for anyone interested in property investment?
Because things have changed so much, and that's the bottom line. Things have changed so much. We've seen so much legislative change there, but today is actually a brilliant time to invest because we're seeing a whole new era in housing. We're seeing a whole new era where tenants have changed. The demographic of a tenant, the demographic of a landlord have changed. We're seeing a new era of housing that's professional, educated, ethical landlords, and now they're getting rewarded for behaving in that manner. The new era is going to start right here, and it's all about having the right mindset and the right team behind you to take real advantage of it.
Well, that's a great way of thinking rather than the way a lot of people are thinking, oh, I'm just getting out of this, it's all too hard. But I know you're at the coalface looking after property management teams in the three biggest states in Australia and looking after close to $2 billion worth of assets for our clients at Metropole. How has property management changed over the last, 5 years or so to cope with all these changes that you were hinting at?
Property management has changed exponentially over the last 5 years. I think we've done a couple of podcasts, Michael, that really go into the detail and the depth of those changes from a legislative point of view. But the role of a property manager has changed significantly. That old school property management, where it was rent collection and maintenance processing kind of thing, is no longer. The detail that's required and really the mindset behind really managing your property as an asset has had to completely change. And we're going to see more and more of that as we adjust and the whole industry adjusts as we go through.
I guess, yes, you can't just sit back and think everything's going to be fine. You've got to treat your property investments as a business, but at Metropole, we've always said that. Okay, lots of changes, as you say. From your perspective, though, what's been the biggest shift over the last few years?
Well, I think the biggest shift is the obvious one. We've had so many regulatory and legislative changes, so much in the space for minimum compliance, notice periods, all of that kind of thing that we've really had to change. We've changed what we call them in terms of renters and residential rental providers. We've really had to change about how we think of that entire dynamic and exactly how we're best to manage the asset that is your investment property so that we can adequately keep you compliant and up to date with all that legislation. But play the game smarter, play the game by those new rules, and still make sure that you're succeeding as an investor.
Now, you've written lots of blogs on Property Update about this, so we can't go through every change in every state in detail. It would be boring to say the least, but I'll leave some links in the show notes. But can you walk through some of the most significant legislative changes that we've seen recently?
Absolutely. Now, you know that I could talk for hours, and that's why hours on the legislative changes. So I'll try to keep it relatively short here, but you're right, we'll include some links. There's really 5 main areas that we've seen change. The minimum housing standards. So we've seen lots of things change there in terms of heating and cooling and insulation and energy efficiency, and we're set to see more. We've also seen changes in notice periods and lease termination process. So with the notice periods, in most states, they've now gone out to 90 days from 60 to 90. Rent increases are set to go from 60 to 90.
So just to make it clear, notice period means you can't ask your tenant to leave or to change the rent with a month or 2 months notice. It's now 3 months notice.
Correct, yes. So 90-day notices for rental increase, as long as they're not under a fixed term. 90 days notice if you're going to occupy your own property, so on and so forth. We've also seen some of the other notice periods change. The most recent one in Queensland, where instead of 24 hours notice to enter a premises for an open, it's now 48 hours. So changes there. Of course, the big one that if I think we were taking votes after minimum standards from our owners would be the changes in pets. Quite frankly, now it is extremely hard to have a rental property and not have pets in it. Now, for a long time, Michael, we've been within reason pro-pet because it gave us a point of difference, especially when we're looking at our family homes, as long as they were assessed correctly. Now that point of difference is kind of gone, and in fact, practically it's impossible to block out a tenant or to exclude a tenant that has a pet.
Now, we've discussed this before, and I've given the example. I'm a pet-friendly landlord. I love pets. You do. I've got pets. Having said that, I've got a block of apartments, and on the top floor, there are 1-bedroom apartments which don't have balconies, don't have courtyards. And downstairs, there's courtyards, and tenants have got pets. But somebody asked for having a pet in that 1-bedroom small apartment, again, with no outdoor spaces, and first floor. And we said, no, it's not fair on the pet. And long story short, they took us to the tribunal, and the tribunal member said, you've got to actually allow that. I can't see how that's fair for the poor animal, let alone for the property.
No, but the RSPCA actually supported the tenant's case or the renter's case, saying that the dog that they had chosen was actually apartment orientated.
Yes.
And was the size and the exercise requirements was suitable to the lifestyle.
Anyway,
I'm sure that
it's getting harder, isn't it? And in fact, they can have multiple pets now.
They can. And look, I don't want this to be all about pets either, but there are some things that we need to look at, and there's ways to protect ourselves as well from that.
Yep.
We can't prevent the pet, but we can make sure that we're selecting a tenant that will hopefully look after that pet and will have pets that are appropriate for the property itself.
Yep.
So
Sure.
yeah. So getting back to you'd asked me about the changes. So minimum standards, changes to the notice periods and lease termination, they obviously have to be evidenced now. So you can't just say you're moving in. You need to provide evidence about that. You can't just say I'm selling the property. You have to provide evidence to show that you're selling the property, so on and so forth. Third one was pets. And then those last two are really the requirements for repairs and maintenance and the timeliness of them. We saw some big changes in Queensland there, which really brought Queensland up to the same standards in New South Wales and in Victoria. That whole concept that the maintenance not being done is actually compensatable from the moment that it's reported. It may be impossible from you as a landlord to have attended to it immediately, but it is compensatable immediately. That really brings about the need for those proactive maintenance programs. And we're going to see that a lot more as we move into the future. Last one is obviously rent increases and rent controls. Rent increases can only be made once every 12 months. And of course, again, in Queensland, they're now attached to the property.
Now, just to explain that then, they're attached to the property, which means if the tenant moves out in the middle of that 12-month period, you can't increase the rent.
So yes, in Queensland, they're attached to the property, which means you serve a rent increase. The tenant may be on a periodic lease or they may be fixed term, but you cannot increase the rent again for 12 months from the date at which you increase the rent, which means that, yes, your tenant can vacate and you may even have to return it to the market, but the rent will be the same as in that previous lease.
Well, all these changes clearly favour the tenants over the landlords. What does this mean for investors who are running a business providing a service for people?
Well, it is a service, but it's also a product. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. So put simply, in this day and age, you need to look at your product offering. You can either keep the mindset that, Blockbuster kept or Kodak kept, all those kinds of things, and the market will change and you will lose. Or you can change your product offering. You need to lean in and simply develop a product that meets the needs of the client or the customer, the tenant or the renter, and succeed on that basis. Play the game smarter.
Makes sense. Over time, one of the other changes I've noticed that your team at Metropole have done is how they're using technology. I mean, technology is entering in all elements of real estate. How has software changed the way your team manage our clients' properties?
Technology and software in the last 5 years, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but it seems to have changed the entire world. And given that we're talking about people's homes, then obviously it's changed the way we live as well. So of course, it's got to change the way that we manage property. Now, that's from the simplest things like using ChatGPT to correct my emails or check my grammar or make something difficult a little bit more polite and overcome those kinds of challenges, or to Copilot that I can actually have sitting there that will draft responses to my emails. But it doesn't, draft emails whilst I'm sleeping, but it can't yet, and I hope it doesn't to a certain extent, replace that human touch, that ability to negotiate, that ability to foresee what the future might be, and to deal with those more complex situations. Having said that, AI for us as a property management team has evolved dramatically. We're seeing all of these chat bots. So we're seeing, in the case of REI New South Wales, they actually have Australia's first board member, an AI board member.
Wow.
So,
that.
we're really seeing some, I think her name is Alice Ing, as in AI. It's really quite a changing landscape for us, but we also kind of need it. Before, the legislation was relatively simple. Now it's not just a matter of, committing the top 10 rules and away you go. You need to know what the legislation is, but how it works and how you might be best take those various pieces of legislation to navigate your way through. What is your desired outcome, and how do we work towards that outcome?
I know another form of technology your team's been using for a number of years now is 360-degree property inspection. So when I get my property reports as a landlord, I can actually walk through it and go from one room to the other and see all sorts of things rather than just the still picture. Has all this tech made life easier or more complicated for landlords?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the whole thing is that once upon a time, you would flick through a routine inspection report and you'd be lucky if it had 10 or 12 pictures, 10 or 12 pictures. Now you get a routine inspection and you can literally do your 360 links and walk through your own property. So there's a little bit of, it's great. It's got so much more detail, but it also takes more time to really take in and judge that detail. Having said that, I can only see the need for information, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but people want that detail these days.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's talk about it then. What has happened to the expectations of tenants and landlords? Clearly, there's a lot of publicity from the various tenancy bodies as well as the government bodies to make tenants aware of their rights and to a lesser degree what landlords' responsibilities are. How have tenants' expectations changed, first of all?
I think if you're a landlord, you see the tenants' expectations increasing significantly. If you're a tenant, you see the landlord's expectations increasing significantly. If you're a property manager, you see both. But look, the bottom line...
That's interesting. Property managers are stuck in the middle, aren't they?
They are. It's the tug of war between the two, and both parties believe that they are correct. And that's really the unique thing, but also the taxing thing about our role.
Yes.
But in direct answer to your question, look, to the tenant section, today's tenants are more informed, more vocal, and more selective. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but yes, thanks to the social media platforms, the government rollout of information, education campaigns that Consumer Affairs and RTAs are putting out there, they are very much more educated and aware of their rights, but also their responsibilities. But I guess as a property manager, they absolutely, and so they should, demand both respect and professionalism. And I think that's something that really, as an industry, there needs to be that additional focus on. And that also also is influenced by the changing demographic of a tenant. They're looking
Well,
for.
okay, what about landlords? What are they demanding nowadays, Leanne?
So a landlord, all of their expectations have been raised too. They now feel greater responsibility because they have these greater legislative commitments there and those kinds of things. But I think their expectations are also changing in regard to their responsibility socially as well. No one wants to be a slumlord. Everybody wants to meet those minimum standards, and some of them are actually really what I want to be as a landlord. I want my living room to have heating in it for my elderly tenant or my young family.
Yep.
But I do think expectations, particularly around transparency, compliance, and the overall performance of the asset, is really where our owners are looking for greater. It's not just whether the rent's been paid this month. It's about how's it performing? Is it doing well with the one next door? Am I going to all of a sudden have a major upgrade at the end of this tenancy? So there's complexities there that come along as well.
One of the changes that have occurred around Australia and Melbourne with our lockdowns with COVID was the work from home effect. Now, many people have got a hybrid work environment so that they don't go to the office every day. Has this impacted the sort of properties people are looking for or what tenants are demanding?
Absolutely. We all know, well, it's changed in many ways. We were very lucky at Metropole that we had already started to change before. Like before COVID, there was no work from home from a property manager. That's the bottom line. You worked from your car or your office and you were going to and from. Back in at that stage, we really looked at making our portfolios geographically. So we really looked at making our property managers area experts, as in geographical area experts. And that also meant that we picked people that lived and worked in that area. So they had good local knowledge as well, or were very familiar with what's happening there. Now what we're seeing is there's still that blend of remote working and work from home and work from the office. And that working from home has become really great if you're a property manager who was doing the geographic model previously, because it's great. You can still go out to your properties. Whereas if you're working from the other model, which was based on a portfolio that was very geographically dispersed, you're kind of starting to resent that. And so there's been that change there as well. And, it's also changed the service levels. We're seeing the introduction more and more of property managers that are completely remote and never actually seeing the properties that they manage. So,
That doesn't happen at Metropole.
It does not happen at Metropole, and that's what I'm saying. Because we've got those geographically dispersed portfolios, we get the best of both worlds. We get people that know the area, that actively work and see their properties, because that's actually more convenient for them when they're working from home. But we get that legislative and training and office-orientated work when we come into the office, which is working
so that's
very
what's
well.
happened with property management. What about tenants? Are they looking for different types of properties?
And again, absolutely. I think there's two folds there. Number one, they're working from home more. So they will report maintenance far more quickly. They are looking for different spaces so that they can have that work from home aspect. They're looking for that extra room. They're also willing to go out a little bit further from the city because their commute is only 2 or 3 times a week, as opposed to a commute that was happening every day. So space and a little bit of outdoor space that pushed through after COVID. Having that balcony and that outdoor space or that courtyard became very important during COVID, and it really hasn't got away. There's a real push towards that outdoor space as well.
Sure. Having said that, we've also recommended people buy investment properties in 15 or 20-minute neighbourhoods. Not only do you need the right sort of property for people to be able to work from home, but they also want to be able to ride, drive, walk to a variety of shops, to places of worship, to gyms, to parks, because a lot of people don't have backyards anymore, so they want outdoor spaces. And today people, I guess that's where they meet, they socialise over a coffee or over a meal, so it's the right location as well. So yes, we've clearly noticed a significant change in the sort of properties that will be what we call investment grade.
Well, you used to want to have your work location with all of those facilities around it. That's why people went into the city.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're spending time at home, so you want all of those facilities in a 20-minute walk.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so things have changed, and we know one thing that doesn't change with change is it keeps changing. So what do we know about proposed or pending legislation. Is it all getting too hard?
No, look, I think if we went back to when I started in my career, I would have said the legislation then was complex. I look at it now and almost laugh. But I also started when we were still literally carbon copying people,
Yes.
and doing reports, handwritten reports. That just doesn't happen anymore. But yes, there are more changes to come. I just think because we've had such a large range of changes in the last 5 years and dramatic changes across the board, in the next 5 years, we'll see more finessing of them. So what I mean by that is we'll see possibly all of the states coming more into alignment with the changes that are happening there. We know that rental bidding has just been outlawed. We know that accepting higher rental offers for people looking to promote their application when leasing, we know that that's all going to be restricted across the board. We know that those extended notice periods will be rolled out. We know that there's going to be minimum standards more focused on our ageing population, accessibility and energy. So when they were all big and scary 5 years ago, we kind of know where we're heading with those changes now. So they'll still come. They'll just be that little bit more manageable, that little bit more predictable. And really, that's what our landlords are looking for us now. How do we future-proof their home? The discussion when you're building right now is, do you put solar? Do we abandon gas? Well, you have to now. There's no gas. Do we put in electronic charging stations for EVs and so on and so forth? So it's about now, how do we future-proof for those changes that are coming in the next 5 years? And we know them.
Yes, I guess you're right. So landlords, how can they prepare now to avoid being caught out? I guess one thing, and let me put a good plug in for the team at Metropole, is to have a team of property managers who don't just understand the local property market and what rents are, but understand all these changes and know what's ahead and know how to protect our clients. And that's what we do at Metropole. And so I guess before I actually allow you to answer that question, if you as a landlord, look, you've probably got your property rented at the moment, because any property rents today, you've probably been getting increasing rents. But how protected are you? Is your property manager and asset manager, an investment asset manager, or just a rent collector? I'm going to leave a link in the show notes, and if you go to metropole.com.au, why not actually find out, are you getting the best rent? What are the options? If you want to ask any property management questions, we'd be happy to answer those as well. So sorry for that shameless plug, Leanne, but so I guess my question was initially, what can landlords do to prepare? And I guess one answer is get a good property manager on their side.
Well, that's the obvious answer. Yes, get a good property manager, but look for one that's not just looking for, these are the legislative changes, this is what you have to do to comply now. That's incredibly important. But what's also important is what education, what training, what wider aspects are these property managers being trained in that might help you and forecast for you what is going to happen. Because they shouldn't be making decisions for you anymore on what's happened right now. They should be making decisions for you about what's likely to happen in the future, so that you never get into that point where you're needing to pay compensation. It is unavoidable in some circumstances. It's hard to predict a hot water system bursting, but by the same token, you can be prepared and ready for it as it goes through.
Well, we talked a bit about what's likely to happen in the next year or two with legislation. Let's fast forward to, I don't know, the end of the decade, 2030. I guess that's 5 years' time. What's going to change in property management, do you see?
Michael, I think there's 4 key areas that we're going to see. That real need for transparency and strategic insights, not just rent receipts. So strategic insights. What do I do today, as well as what should I do so I'm ready for next year or the year after? That forward planning, asset management, not just the big picture asset management, but the small picture asset management. When are those white goods going to need to be replaced? When is that depreciable value going to run out? So you're maximising the tax benefit as well as the compliance requirements. Transparency, real-time reporting, digital access, clear communication as it's going through. Once upon a time, you used to write a letter and post it and wait for 3 days for it to come back. Those days are long, long gone. You pretty much want to see, as the tenant is punching in their maintenance requests, almost automatic responses, so we can really narrow that response time down, minimise compensation. Compliance management. With the introduction of rental task forces across basically every state and territory in Australia now, and the actual application of the penalty points, penalty unit points, that is actually, there are fines now for not being compliant and not maintaining your property to those levels. And I also think that tenant relationship, and you want a property manager who will build a relationship with your tenant, because that whole demographic of a tenant is changing. We're seeing more rent vesting, so that both educates the tenant because they are actually an investor themselves, so they're aware of more of those things. But also what we'll find is the real cost will become vacancy, because tenants are also now, because of the housing crises, because of the living crises and the cost of living, more and more people, professional people, family orientated people are actually renting. And as a result of that, building that relationship so we hold on to good tenants longer becomes more and more important.
Now, Leanne, we've said a couple of times that property managers are now more than rent collectors, they're asset managers. Can you explain how we do that more in practice at Metropole to help our landlords?
I think there's two things. If we've got any landlords listening to this that still think that property management is about rent collection, they need to go back to the start and listen again, because there's just so much that has changed. And that's very easy to prove as well. Just call up the Residential Tenancies Act. The section now on rent collection is so small compared to everything else. But to answer your question about building relationships with tenants, as much as AI is coming in, and we want that for the quick and easy, the repeat conversation, there is so much to be said for that human interaction. And I think people want that more and more. For a while there, we were going away. Everything was going away from telephone calls. Everything was chatbots and all the rest of it. And that will still develop. But having those personal relationships, somebody that you can actually call and talk to, somebody who's actually seen your property, becomes more and more vital as we navigate the next 5 years.
So how does your team at Metropole go beyond the basics to help landlords grow and protect their investments?
Well, I think there's two things in that. First of all, we are absolutely blessed. If you want to be a property manager, come to Metropole. You're surrounded by people who are educated. We've got licensed builders, we've got economists, we've got financial wealth strategists. We've got all of this information, tax specialists all around us that help us really expand our understanding and our mindsets and our thought processes about what really is in our client's best interest. And that's
so they think like investors.
Exactly. We think like investors, we manage like investors. And I guess, Michael, again, the way that we're set up is that we want the client to have such a good and successful outcome with this single property that they go on to purchase another property and expand their portfolio over time. And as you know, people under management with Metropole are 6 and 7 times more likely to own multiple investment properties.
That's true. Well, this has been, I know what's going on there, but I hope for our listeners it's been eye-opening, and it's clear that property management's nothing like it used to be. It's more complex, more regulated, and frankly more important than ever for protecting your wealth and maximising your returns as a property investor. So if you're an investor who wants to treat your property like a business, and let's face it, that's what it is, then you need somebody in your corner who understands the rules, keeps up with the changes, and acts in your best interest, not somebody who just collects rents and responds to leaky taps. And that's exactly what we do at Metropole, not to respond to the leaky taps, but look after your interests. We don't see ourselves just as property managers, but as Leanne's clearly said, as strategic asset managers. We take care of your investments as if they're our own, because we understand that for you, it's not just about the property, it's your financial future, really, isn't it? So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the constant changes in legislation, if your current property manager isn't keeping you informed, or if you're managing your own property, and I really, really hope you're not, then maybe it's time to have a chat with our team at Metropole. We're here to help you stay ahead of the game and I guess sleep a little bit easier at night. So you can find out more by going to metropole.com.au, and you can click on the property management tab and inquire about how we can help you, or I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. And thanks again for joining us today. And for those listening to this, if you got benefit from it, why not share this with other fellow investors? I don't think enough investors currently know about all these changes and how they can affect them. And if you don't currently subscribe to the show, wherever you're watching this or listening to this, please click the follow or subscribe button so we can keep you updated about property management, sure, but about property investment, the economy and money management. Thanks for your time, Leanne.
Thank you, Michael.
As a way of having a little more fun in these podcasts, I've introduced a property trivia question each show, and the aim is to give you, my listeners and viewers, an opportunity to win a hard copy of one of my best-selling books, How to Grow a Multi-Million-Dollar Property Portfolio in Your Spare Time. And everyone who submits their answer is also going to get a special new report I've just written. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you the question and then just go to propertytrivia.com.au, enter your answer, and each week I'll select 3 to get a hard copy of my book. But don't worry if you're listening to a slightly older episode, your entry is still going to count. So here's this week's question. It's one for, I guess, the demographic lovers. What percentage of Australians live in urban areas, that is in cities or major towns? Take your guess or show off your census smarts and go to propertytrivia.com.au and be in the draw to win. So give us a percentage of what percentage of Australians live in urban areas, that is in cities or major towns, and 3 people are going to be drawn to win a copy of How to Grow a Multi-Million-Dollar Property Portfolio, but everyone gets a copy of my new special report.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
My mindset message for you today is a really short, sharp one. And the message really is you never really figure it out. I guess over the time I've learned about 2 rules in life. Number 1, you don't have to figure it all out. And number 2, if you think you have figured it all out, go back and look at rule 1. So here's a lesson I wish I learned earlier in my life. No one really knows what they're doing. Not your mentors, not the people you admire, not even the ones who seem to have all the answers. Everyone, no matter how polished they appear, is just stumbling along trying to make sense of things as they go. And here's the thing. If you're waiting until you've got it all figured out before you start something new, you're going to be waiting forever. So don't fall into the trap to think that you need every detail worked out or every question answered before you begin. The truth is, no one ever started anything significant with perfect clarity. Those who achieve great things don't wait until they've got every piece of the puzzle worked out. They just start with what they know and figure out the rest along the way. Some people are just better at embracing the messiness of the journey. They understand that progress isn't about having all the answers from the outset. It's about having the confidence to start even when the path's uncertain. Starting something new is always uncomfortable. And that's precisely where growth happens. So if there's something you've been holding off because you're waiting for that elusive moment when you feel ready, my message to you today is stop waiting. Start now with what you know and trust yourself to figure out the rest. Because if you keep marching courageously into the unknown, step by step, you'll be amazed at what you're capable of discovering, not just about the world, but about yourself. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen-to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney Podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour And you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?